Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 491 Tip-Off. At this informal meeting in Worms, a total of more than 100 princes came, among which a considerable number were religious princes. In fact, as far as the entire anti-emperor alliance is concerned, the most determined anti-emperor alliance is mainly those secular princes. Because what the emperor really wants to deprive is mainly the rights of secular princes. And the religious princes, because they belong to the Holy See, are above the secular world and are not too worried about what the emperor will do to them. After all, the emperor needs the pope to crown him. At the same time, they are also afraid of being excommunicated by the pope. Therefore, the emperor cannot touch the religious princes casually. However, these religious princes are not from the civilian class at all, and most of them come from the sons of secular princes who have no inheritance rights. Therefore, in order to safeguard the interests of their families, the religious princes joined this anti-emperor alliance, but they were not as firm as the secular princes. Just like this time, Frederick III tried to use all the princes and called on all the German princes to collectively send troops to defeat Marin, but was rejected by the religious princes. Just kidding, Marin is a popular man in front of the Pope. If he is moved, it will definitely anger the Pope. The Pope is not the boss of the secular princes, but the boss of the religious princes. Relatives and friends of the boss, do you dare to hit him? Moreover, as the first religious elector, Archbishop of Cologne, who opposed the use of troops against Marin, he also had his own little thoughts in his heart. As one of the 7 electors of Germany, Hermann IV is also a veteran politician and will not be fooled easily. After all, every religious prince was elected after defeating many competitors. Those who are too stupid have been eliminated long ago. Therefore, the average IQ of religious princes is higher than that of secular princes who inherit the title by lying. Hermann IV has long seen that after holding the new thick thigh of His Majesty the Pope, Marin no longer needs to continue to be the thug of Emperor Maximilian I. Moreover, a very important point is that Marin's identity has changed. Marin has changed from a pure thug under Maximilian I to a prince. What is a prince? It is a local emperor. Since he is a local emperor, he naturally doesn't like to be controlled too much by the real emperor. Therefore, Hermann IV knew very well that from the moment Marin became the Count of East Frisia, Marin's identity and position had changed completely. As a prince who dominated the territory, he was definitely not willing to hand over power to the emperor. Moreover, Marin was a smart man, and it was impossible for him not to understand such a truth: if other princes were finished, Marin, the prince, would also be finished together. To use a very popular internet saying in later generations, the butt determines the head. It means that when one's position changes, the position and starting point of thinking about problems will change accordingly. For example, when a person is still an ordinary person and when he becomes a big man, his position in thinking about problems must be completely different. For example, as a home buyer, he must wish that the house price is very low, or even given away for free. And a real estate developer who sells houses would like the house price to rise to the sky and break through the sky. For the same person, when you buy a house, you have one mentality, but if you become a real estate developer, your position will be completely opposite. Although Hermann IV had never heard of the famous saying, the butt determines the head, he was also very clear that Marin had changed from a thug under the emperor to a prince with autonomy. The change in identity made Marin no longer follow the emperor's lead as before. An obvious phenomenon is that Marin began to understand how to expand his territory. And expanding territory is a thought that only princes have. As a pure thug, he would not think of these. For example, after winning the Battle of Lübeck, Marin chose to go north instead of south, which is the best proof. Because everyone with a discerning eye knows that if Marin's army goes south to Saxony and Brandenburg, even if they can get benefits, they will definitely be restrained. Because these two principalities are both well-known electoral states in Germany with huge influence. Even if Marin led his troops into these two countries, he could not mess around casually, let alone destroy these two countries. It is different in Denmark, which does not belong to Germany. Even if it is severely bullied by Marin, other princes will not care about the life or death of Denmark except Saxony and Brandenburg, which are related to the Danish royal family. Even Hermann IV has a feeling that Denmark will definitely lose a large piece of meat this time. Even a throne may be taken away. After all, the Danish royal family is in charge of 2 thrones: the Danish throne and the Norwegian throne. The Danish throne is unlikely. If Marin dares to grab it, it may touch the sensitive nerves of European countries. However, the Kingdom of Norway, a kingdom with a weak sense of existence, may not be taken seriously by other countries even if the throne is taken away by Marin. Because Norway is a wild land in the north after all, it is impossible to farm, and can only graze and fish. Because potatoes suitable for planting in cold areas have not yet been introduced, there is no planting industry in Norway now. Therefore, in the eyes of European countries, Norway is a wild land with only the name of a kingdom. Even this kingdom was established during the Viking pirate period. At that time, the Viking pirates were roaming all over the world and were very arrogant. Other countries dared not have any objections to the Vikings establishing a kingdom. However, as time went by, the Vikings declined. Now, if Norway wants to upgrade to a kingdom without the title of a kingdom, other countries may not recognize it. You know, even a powerful country like Lithuania is still only a grand duchy and cannot be upgraded to a kingdom. Therefore, the throne of the Kingdom of Norway is really unworthy of its name. Therefore, Hermann IV judged that Marin might want to seize the crown of Norway. Otherwise, he would not have gone north first. And seizing the crown of Norway means that Marin has the heart to be independent, and it is impossible for him to help Maximilian I to unify Germany. By then, Marin has become a foreign monarch. In other words, he is on the same level as Maximilian I, only half a level lower. Is it necessary to be a lackey for Maximilian I? Obviously it is impossible. It is based on this judgment that Hermann IV did not believe a word of Frederick III's deception. In addition to the relationship with the Pope, he directly stood up and vetoed the proposal to organize a group to beat Marin. Moreover, deep down in his heart, Hermann IV was also very jealous of Frederick III. Although they were both electors, the Archbishop of Cologne did not have the real power of the Archbishop of Mainz. The Archbishop of Mainz was the Grand Speaker of Germany, and the Archbishop of Cologne was the Grand Speaker of Burgundy. But the problem is that most of the Duchy of Burgundy was taken away by the French, and the Archbishop of Cologne's power shrunk greatly, nor was he as prestigious as Frederick III among the secular electors. Strictly speaking, Archbishop Hermann IV of Cologne was very jealous of Frederick III's appeal among the princes. Moreover, Frederick III wanted to trick the princes into working for him for free and organizing a group to beat Marin, which obviously regarded others as fools. Therefore, Hermann IV was unwilling to pay attention to Frederick III. After the meeting, Hermann IV thought for half the night, and then called his trusted subordinates. "Colin, I have a secret mission for you." Colin was Hermann IV's trusted attendant, and was a confidant brought by Hermann IV from the land of Hesse. Generally, Hermann IV would assign him to do some shady things. "Master, please give me your orders," Colin said respectfully. "After dawn, you arrange 2 groups of people to go south to Rome and report to His Holiness the Pope that the German princes want to embarrass Marin. The other group goes north to inform Marin in Denmark." "This. Master, if other princes knew about it, they would be unhappy," Colin said hesitantly. "That's why I asked you to do this. Remember, choose reliable people and don't leak the secrets." "Yes." After that, Colin turned and left to make arrangements. The reason why Hermann IV did this was because he planned to please the Pope. Because Hermann IV knew that he was old, and God knew how many years he could live. Therefore, he planned to cultivate a rising star in the family, develop in the religious world, and preferably become a religious prince. In this way, not only can he become a staunch ally of the Hessen state, but he can also benefit the Hessen family. Just like when he became the Archbishop of Cologne, he made huge wealth for the Hessen family. Although most of the property is still in his own hands now. But once he dies, won't it all belong to the Hessen family? He tried to please the Pope this time so that the Pope could take care of a monk descendant selected by the Hessen family, his cousin named Frederick. This time he gave the Pope a favor, and the Pope would definitely return the favor and speed up the promotion of his younger generation. It would be best if his cousin could be promoted to the position of bishop before the current Pope died. In this way, even if he died, the Hesse family's influence in the religious world would continue, and the Hesse state would have a good ally and helper. Chapter 492, The Wrath of the Transmigrator. Outside Copenhagen, Marin was eating melons while watching the competition. It was summer, a good time for a large number of fruits and vegetables to be on the market. However, the dignitaries in Copenhagen could not taste them. Because Copenhagen was surrounded, the melon farmers outside could not send watermelons into the city. At this moment, Marin was a good melon eater, chewing the brightest red watermelon while watching the veterans fighting with relish. On the side of the competition field, there were carts of watermelons. Marin stipulated that the champion group of the daily group fight could collectively use these freshly listed watermelons. Of course, the soldiers could not enjoy eating watermelons, and each person could only get a piece of watermelon. Unlike Marin, he was holding the biggest watermelon and chewing it fiercely. These watermelons were originally planted in the manors near Copenhagen and used to supply the dignitaries in Copenhagen. However, because the city was surrounded, these watermelons could not be transported into the city. It just so happened that when Marin's cavalry patrolled, they found a large melon field. Then, these watermelons gathered to support Marin's army. Anyway, the dignitaries in Copenhagen couldn't eat them. Instead of rotting in the melon field, it was better to hand them over to the East Frisian army to solve. However, because the quantity was insufficient and it was supplied to the dignitaries after all, Marin had to satisfy himself and only use it to reward the best winners in the competition. Moreover, each person could only get a piece of watermelon. But even so, the soldiers were satisfied. After all, watermelon in this era is not something that everyone can eat. The bread that ordinary people eat is mixed with soil, so how can they have the conditions to eat melons? This is also due to the backward agriculture in Europe, with such low yields and high grain prices. Watermelons and the like can only be enjoyed by the dignitaries, and serfs and the like should honestly eat black stick bread mixed with soil. Unlike the Ming dynasty of the same period, ordinary country landlords could eat watermelons in summer. There is no way. They have developed agriculture and spread manure, so the watermelons they grow are bigger. Eating watermelons and watching a group of muscular men fighting in a group gives me the same feeling as watching a young and dangerous movie in my previous life. Moreover, the scene here is bigger. After all, this is an army, with tens of thousands of people, not comparable to a few hundred gangsters. Of course, it doesn't look passionate. After all, young and dangerous use knives, which makes them very passionate and exciting. And stabbing each other with sticks is much more boring. However, in terms of lethality, machetes are not even worthy of spears. This is also why spears were popular in ancient armies. In addition to the fact that spears save more iron materials, their lethality is considerable, which is an important reason. In this era, because of the lack of entertainment projects, especially in the barracks, watching a group of muscular guys fighting is probably the only fun. However, this kind of competition is not just Marin's personal fun. Its practical effect is also very good. After all, this kind of combative collective competition can also train the soldier's ability to cooperate in combat. Marin doesn't like to hold any sports games, because, even if those individual events decide many champions, what's the use? The army looks at the ability of the team, not the individual ability. Unless it is to select special forces. Therefore, Marin prefers to watch the group battles of soldiers, rather than any individual battles. Even in shooting competitions, the total score of the team shooting is looked at, not the individual shooting score. Of course, in modern sports games, the only event retained by Marin is probably football. Because football is a team battle of 11 people. Unlike basketball, because of the small number of people, it has degenerated into a personal show of muscular old blacks. Moreover, Marin emphasizes overall football in military football and does not allow single work. If someone wants to show himself, running all over the field with the ball alone, what awaits him will not be cheers, but military punishment. After all, Marin promotes football in the army to train the tacit understanding and coordination between soldiers, not to let them show themselves. Ribery and Robin, who are dictators, will probably be beaten with military sticks by Marin. After watching several team fights while eating melons in the morning, Marin watched several football matches in the afternoon. The original 90-minute game was changed by Marin to a 45-minute halftime. In this way, he can watch more games. According to Marin's instructions, all soldiers must advance and retreat together when playing football, and keep the formation intact at all times. Anyone who runs around will be beaten with a military stick after the game. Under Marin's harsh requirements, all soldiers participating in the football game pay great attention to their positions when playing football. When attacking, everyone presses forward collectively, and when defending, everyone tries their best to return to defense. It looks a bit like the Dutch's all-out attack and defense. Of course, running all over the field consumes a lot of physical energy. Therefore, Marin arranged the game for 45 minutes, and since the soldiers usually have physical training, it is not very strenuous. Just as Marin was watching the two powerful teams compete, the guards suddenly reported that a mysterious person wanted to see Marin. So Marin left the court and went to meet the mysterious person. In fact, the guard knew the other party's identity. After all, Hermann IV's men had shown their identity cards. However, due to the need for confidentiality, when reporting to Marin, the guard could only say that he was a mysterious person to prevent the news of Hermann IV's men coming to Marin from leaking. Soon, Marin, wearing plate armor, brought Kahn and other men to meet this mysterious person. Marin was afraid of death, fearing that the other party was an assassin. So, he simply put on plate armor and brought Kahn and other masters to help. Fortunately, Denmark is not hot in summer, otherwise, Marin wearing plate armor might get heat stroke. After seeing Marin, Hermann IV's trusted subordinates quickly handed the secret letter to Marin. Marin wore leather gloves, opened the letter, to prevent poison, and began to read. As he read, Marin's face became more and more ugly. Hermann IV told Marin that Frederick III did not stay in his country after escaping, but immediately led his team to Worms and asked Archbishop Jacob of Mainz to convene many princes who were not on good terms with Marin and convened an anti-Marin conference. What's more hateful is that Frederick III actually changed the concept and said that the confrontation between the Bosse coalition and the Marin army was a confrontation between the princes and the emperor's forces, which caused the princes tension. The most outrageous thing is that Frederick III, this old bastard, actually wanted to call on all the princes of Germany to form a group to beat up Marin. If Hermann IV and other religious princes had not known that Marin had a close relationship with the current pope and rejected Frederick III's suggestion, perhaps Marin would have faced a group fight of hundreds of thousands of troops. This old bastard. He took the initiative to invade others, and after losing, he still had the face to encourage others to help him get revenge. Too shameless. Marin slammed the table angrily. The matter was obviously very simple. Saxony and Brandenburg formed a group to attack the alliance of Marin and Lübeck and Hamburg, and then were defeated. However, this shameless old thing actually said that he was the pioneer sent by Maximilian I to unify Germany, and called on everyone to beat him up. Originally, this matter was so absurd, so it would be fine. However, most of the secular princes who attended the meeting responded positively, which made Marin very angry. If he were present, Marin would have wanted to roar angrily at this group of secular princes, "Have your brains been eaten by dogs? It is obviously a war between us, and you are just joining in the fun. You don't even know that you are being used as a gun." Moreover, it seems that Frederick III not only wants to prevent Saxony from suffering the fate of ceding land and paying compensation by inciting the princes, but he even intends to encourage the princes to form a group to destroy him. Marin was immediately furious. He decided that no matter what, he would teach Saxony an unforgettable lesson this time and would never succumb to the pressure from those stupid princes. At worst, after the failure, he would take his people to America to develop, and then fight back. Chapter 493, Strong Attack. Marin was so angry that he had given up the choice of going south and decided to go north. In fact, he had the intention of not wanting to break up with the German princes and made concessions. Because he knew that Frederick III would definitely move around. However, he did not expect that Frederick III, the old shameless man, wanted to pay less, but actually wanted to call on all the German princes to destroy him. So Marin was surprisingly angry. Therefore, Marin decided to march south and attack Saxony directly. This time, Marin decided not to hold back, but planned to plunder the electorate of Saxony and teach the old fox a profound lesson. Moreover, according to intelligence, although Frederick III went to Worms, his brother John, the heir to the electorate of Saxony, stayed in Wittenberg. Frederick III had no offspring and was not married. He even worked as a clergyman. However, his younger brother John was too incompetent, so their father, Elector Ernst, chose him to succeed the elector and co-govern the electorate of Saxony with his younger brother John. Of course, it was mainly Frederick III who had the final say. Only when he was not in the country did John serve as regent. It was precisely because of his religious background that Frederick III later became interested in Martin Luther and supported Martin Luther in the religious reform. But in fact, Martin Luther was also used. The reason why those reformist princes supported Martin Luther was that Martin Luther supported the confiscation of land and wealth owned by the Catholic Church. For those poor princes, this was the real reason why they supported the religious reform. After all, Catholicism controlled the entire Middle Ages in Europe, and the land and wealth it owned were countless, making those princes and nobles jealous. Therefore, Martin Luther's religious reform was more like robbing the Catholic Church than opposing Catholicism. However, Martin Luther's religious reform was not thorough. Because its beneficiaries were mainly those princes and nobles and the royal family, and ordinary people did not benefit much. Strictly speaking, the Calvinist religious reform was a more thorough reform. Martin Luther's religious reform was used and distorted by the princes and nobles. Of course, the but determines the head. From the moment Marin became a prince and noble, he was destined to be a mortal enemy of Calvinism. As for Martin Luther's Lutheranism, Marin is more welcoming. Although, he may stand on the side of the Holy See. However, it does not prevent Marin from hoping that Martin Luther's Lutheranism will muddy the water. In this way, Marin will have the opportunity to fish in troubled waters and annex the territories and wealth of those princes in the name of maintaining the Holy See. After all, in the Protestant War, most of the northern princes stood on the side of Lutheranism. As long as Marin stands on the side of Catholicism, he can annex a lot of land. Speaking of which, the reason why Marin was unwilling to attack the electorate of Saxony was mainly because he was afraid that his actions would interfere with Martin Luther's affairs. Because he still expected Martin Luther to come to Wittenberg and start a religious reform according to the historical trajectory. However, Marin is so angry now that he doesn't care about whether it affects Martin Luther or not. Moreover, it is already July 5th, Martin Luther probably encountered a storm on his way home on July 2nd this year, and prayed to Saint Anna to protect him and promised to become a monk. Before that, Martin Luther was just a college student and had not yet joined the church. Marin calculated that it is already July 5th, and Martin Luther should want to become a monk according to his oath. As long as you get over this hurdle, it will be easy. Do you think Martin Luther will go to Wittenberg in the future? This is simple. Marin can pay the church people and arrange Martin Luther to go to the church in Wittenberg. As for whether Martin Luther will carry out religious reform in the future, this is also easy. Marin will send professional spies to fool Martin Luther and instill the 95 Theses he later listed into him in advance through spies. Martin Luther was born in 1483 and is only 22 years old now. It is easiest to fool such young people. Then, Marin secretly spent money to let Martin Luther and Frederick III meet in advance, and persuaded them to propose that the church should abide by the view of poverty and hand over the church property to the official management. This matter became. Why did the religious war happen in Germany in the 16th century? Isn't it because of money? The reason why the northern princes supported Protestantism was mainly for the land and property of the Catholic Church. All beliefs are false, and the land and wealth of the Catholic Church are what make the northern princes jealous. There are many plains and arable land in northern Germany. However, for thousands of years in the Middle Ages, too much arable land was occupied by the Church. Faced with the powerful Church, the German princes did not dare to say much. But someone took the lead in making trouble and proposed to divide the church's land and property. If they did not support it, there would be ghosts. It was just what they wanted. Later, the reason why almost all northern Germany turned to Protestantism, while the south was still Catholic territory, was mainly caused by Charles V. Because Charles V, who owned both the Spanish Empire and the Holy Roman Empire, was too powerful. The Habsburg family's base camps, Austria and Hungary, are in the south. The princes in the south also wanted to confiscate the church's land and property, but they couldn't beat Charles V. Of course, Charles V didn't end up well. Austria's base was saved, but the Netherlands, where Charles V was born, was later conquered by Calvinism. After a complex ideological struggle, Marin confirmed that Martin Luther still had the ability to make trouble, and finally made up his mind to send troops to the electorate of Saxony and capture several important cities. The most important thing is to break through Wittenberg and capture Frederick III's brother John and John's sons. If Frederick III really mobilized all the German princes to attack him, he could just take a boat and temporarily withdraw from Germany. He could flee to America or retreat to Norway. Anyway, Denmark was defeated and Sweden was independent. It was not impossible for him to seize Norway as a springboard for counterattack. But before leaving, Marin would massacre the city of Wittenberg and kill John and John's children. In this way, the eldest branch of the Wettin family would be extinct. No matter how Frederick III tries to escape, he must accept the consequence of the extinction of the eldest branch of the Wettin family. The consequence of the extinction of the eldest branch is that the title of elector will fall on the second branch several decades in advance. As far as the current situation is concerned, it will fall on the head of the idiot Duke George. Of course, that was the madness before he had to retreat. It's not that time yet, but I must hurry to the south, break through Wittenberg, and capture John's family to threaten Frederick III. If the other party does not accept the threat, I don't mind killing John's family and sending their heads to Frederick III. Although this is a bit against the rules, the other party actually wants to call on all the German princes to beat me up, which is not giving me a way to live. If the other party doesn't give me a way to live, what rules can I talk about? It is right to kill all the eldest branches of the Wettin family and then run away by boat. But before going south, Marin thinks it is better to capture Copenhagen first. After capturing Copenhagen, take Norway first. In this way, even if he faces a besiege by all of Germany, he can take his family members and the army and retreat to Norway first. As for the German coalition, who doesn't know that the Germans have always been landlubbers? The only ethnic group that is good at sailing, the Frisians, are also Marin supporters. As long as he hides in Norway, a bunch of German landlubbers will be helpless. At that time, maybe he can transform himself into a new Viking pirate and invade Germany. But who cares, the focus now is to capture Copenhagen. Marin has no time to wait, so he called Schwartz and ordered, starting tomorrow, we will attack Copenhagen and take it down as soon as possible. Schwartz was stunned and raised his doubts, but Copenhagen will soon run out of food. The enemy will definitely surrender by the end of July. We don't have that much time. Marin sighed and told Schwartz about Hermann IV's intelligence. Schwartz quickly understood Marin's intention, so he immediately turned around to arrange the attack on Copenhagen. Chapter 494, Flying Claw Tactics. However, the assault was not very smooth. Early the next morning, Schwartz began to arrange for the army to launch a strong attack. Like the siege method of ordinary armies, the East Frisian army used a ladder to climb the walls of Copenhagen. But the problem is that the walls of Copenhagen are very tall and strong. After all, as the capital of the Vikings for hundreds of years, the Danes have accumulated a lot of wealth, and naturally have the money to reinforce their own capital. In addition, there are rivers and lakes on the southeast and northwest sides of Copenhagen, which are not suitable for attack. Therefore, Marin's army can only launch a strong attack on the southwest and northeast walls. Although the more than 10,000 Danish defenders were demoralized by the besieged on all sides choir organized by Marin. However, those more than 10,000 people are veterans after all, veterans with skilled combat skills. If a decisive battle is fought in the wilderness, more than 10,000 veterans with demoralized troops will still not work. However, with the cover of Copenhagen's tall and solid walls, these veterans were somewhat comforted and still had the courage to resist. You know, as long as there are tall and solid walls, even militias can withstand the siege of the regular army, let alone these veterans. They just have low morale, and their combat capabilities are much stronger than militias. Therefore, the strong attack organized by Marin caused huge casualties to the East Frisian army. More than 1,200 people were directly killed and wounded on the first day. I was a little more careful on the second day, but there were more than 900 casualties. Fortunately, these casualties were mainly injuries, especially falls. Among the more than 2,100 casualties, only more than 300 people died, and the rest were all injured. The Mongolian doctors brought by Marin are best at treating traumatic injuries. Except for more than 200 people who broke their arms and legs directly, the other 1,800 wounded can be cured quickly and return to the battle sequence. Moreover, due to the use of alcohol, gauze and lime, the disinfection work in Marin's army was done very well, because there were very few soldiers who were injured and infected. However, such a large number of casualties still shocked Marin. After fighting for several years, he rarely felt such a large number of casualties. In particular, this was caused in just 2 days. In desperation, Marin had to suspend the strong attack. However, Marin could not give up the attack. After all, he was still in a hurry to go south. In order to solve this problem, Marin convened a meeting of all middle and senior military officers to brainstorm and seek ways to quickly break through Copenhagen. However, most of Marin's men were officers with strong execution capabilities, and they didn't seem to be very good when it came to intelligence. So Marin turned his attention to the only man who was considered a smart player, Wolf Esprand. After all, Wolf Esprand could come up with a strategy to flood the 7 armies in Europe, which was lacking in intelligence. He was a very rare military talent with intelligence. Marin couldn't think of a way himself, so naturally, his hope fell on Wolf Esprand. Seeing Marin looking over, Wolf Esprand naturally knew what Marin was thinking. After thinking for a long time, Wolf Esprand finally spoke cautiously, "I do have a way, I wonder if it will work. Tell me quickly." Marin was also desperate at this moment. Moreover, Wolf Esprand was not a quack doctor. "Cage is in charge of the special forces now, right?" Wolf Esprand said after considering the words. "Yes, you want Cage to climb the wall in the middle of the night." Marin frowned. Using the special forces to use flying claws to climb the wall in the middle of the night, this trick was used by Marin's army when attacking Florence. However, the target of the use was the Italian army with lax military discipline. Moreover, the other party did not think that anyone would use the tactic of flying claws to climb the city wall. What's more ironic is that the Italian mercenaries are used to picking up girls at night and have no intention of defending the city seriously, so Stade easily succeeded. The Danish army in Copenhagen is different. Since they were besieged and suffered a great loss last time, the Danes are still very vigilant. They leave people to guard the city walls day and night to avoid giving Marin a chance to take advantage of the loopholes. Wolf Esprand nodded and said, "Yes, my opinion is to send special forces to climb the city wall with flying claws in the middle of the night. However, they don't climb the southwest wall, nor are they afraid of the northeast wall, but..." "You mean, the southeast and northwest walls facing the water?" Marin's eyes lit up. "Yes, sir. I used a telescope to observe the Danish defenders at night and found that they were still defending tightly on the southwest and northeast walls in the middle of the night. However, the defense on the southeast and northwest walls facing the water seemed to be more lax. But even if they climbed up the southeast or northwest walls, it would be useless. You know, even if they captured part of the wall, the follow-up troops couldn't attack. Schwartz said doubtfully. This is also a big problem, because if part of the southwest and northeast sections of Copenhagen's city wall are occupied, the follow-up infantry can set up ladders to continue climbing up and then seize and stabilize this section of the city wall. But the southeast and northwest sections of the city wall are different. These two sections of the city wall are adjacent to rivers and lakes. Even if the special forces climb up and can occupy part of the city wall section. However, the follow-up troops cannot attack. Because the soldiers cannot set up ladders on the river and lake to continue to attack this section of the city wall and consolidate the results. After listening to Schwartz's words, Wolf Esperand nodded and said, "You are right. Even if the special forces climb up the southeast or northwest sections of the city wall facing the water, they cannot continue to guide the follow-up troops to occupy this section of the city wall." "But, I didn't say to let the special forces continue to stay there." "What do you mean?" Schwartz was a little puzzled. "My idea is to let Cage and his special forces use the grappling hook to climb up the wall section facing the water, sneak into the city, and open the northeast gate." "What if the enemy finds out?" Schwartz asked. "It's okay. Don't we let Danish women and old people sing every night? Tonight, we let the choir sing hard under the southwest wall to attract the attention of the Danish defenders. Then, Cage and his special forces will quietly approach the southeast wall of the northeast wall, swim across the river, use the flying claw to climb the wall, enter the city, lurk under the gate of the northeast wall, and launch a surprise attack. I have observed that the chorus arranged by Lord Marin every night attracts the attention of the Danish defenders. As long as the enemy focuses on the southwest wall section in the middle of the night, and Cage and his men are walking on the sparsely populated southeast wall facing the river, I believe it is still easy to hide." Wolf Esperand explained his plan in detail. Now the number of special forces under Cage has expanded to about 300. According to Wolf Esperand's plan, they will use flying claws to climb up the city wall from the southeast section of the river, enter the city, and then lurk inside the northeast city gate to launch a surprise attack. "Can 300 people take down the city gate?" someone questioned. "You know, because Marin is good at sneak attacks on city gates. Therefore, Marin's opponents have strengthened the protection of the inside of the city gate, and there are at least hundreds of elite soldiers guarding the inside of the city gate. This is the case with Denmark. After they learned about Marin's habits from Saxony, they naturally strengthened the protection of the city gate." Wolf Esperand laughed and said, "As for the combat effectiveness of the special forces, I believe Lord Marin himself knows best." Marin nodded. As the creator of the special forces, he was naturally aware of their combat effectiveness. Perhaps, in a head-on confrontation, special forces were not much better than elite soldiers. However, special forces were extremely good at sneak attacks, and it was normal to win with fewer troops. Not to mention that the Danes stationed hundreds of elite soldiers at the city gate. Even if there were 2,000 people, these 300 special forces could still carve a bloody path. However, the casualties would be huge. However, through reconnaissance with telescopes from the high platform, Marin and generals such as Wolf Esperand knew that the Danes only had a few hundred elite soldiers at the city gate. 300 special forces can definitely easily defeat the enemy. Just like that, the meeting decided to send Cage and his 300 special forces that night, use flying claws to quietly climb the city from the unmanned section of the southeastern river wall, and use grappling hooks and ropes to lower into the city, take advantage of the night to lurk inside the northeast gate of Copenhagen, and then launch a surprise attack, open the northeast gate, and let the East Frisian army into the city. After having an attack plan, Marin happily called Cage to his side and said with a smile, "Cage, if you make great contributions in this battle, I decide to officially give you the surname Cage. And name you Nicholas Cage, and become a hereditary noble." Chapter 495, Breaking the City Again. Cage and his 300 special forces did not launch an attack that night. The reason for giving up the attack was that Marin's army had just attacked the city during the day, and the Danish army was still very vigilant at this time. If the city was attacked that night, it might be discovered by the Danish army. Therefore, Marin waited for 2 days. When the Danes thought that the East Frisian army had given up the siege, Cage and the 300 special forces began to prepare. In addition, during these 2 days, Marin, Schwartz, Wolf Esperand and others, as well as Cage, discussed the armor of the special forces and what weapons to use. Because these 300 special forces had to quietly swim across the Copenhagen Bay southeast of Copenhagen, and then climb up to the top of the city with flying claws. Therefore, when swimming, the equipment carried should not be too heavy. Therefore, plate armor was excluded first. The mahjong mat armor made of wood chips became the first choice for the 300 special forces because of its good buoyancy. Of course, the mahjong mat armor they wore was covered with iron sheets on the outside. Although it would increase the weight, the wood sheets themselves have good buoyancy, and the weight of the iron sheet was negligible. In addition, after entering the city, because it is necessary to force the city gate, it is best to have a shield. Iron shields are definitely not okay, and it is too strenuous to swim with an iron shield on your back. Therefore, you still have to choose a wooden shield. Not only is it light, it is also convenient for carrying and climbing the city wall. When swimming, the wooden shield can also provide sufficient buoyancy to reduce the pressure of swimming. In addition to the shield, the weapons used by the special forces to attack are mainly sabers imitating the Type 65 cavalry sword used by light cavalry. This kind of knife is made of high-carbon steel and is very strong and durable. It is very advantageous to chop against enemy weapons. Moreover, because the back of the knife is straight, it can also be used for straight stabbing, and it can act as a one-handed sword. In addition, the weight of the Type 65 saber is not heavy, only about 1.9 kilograms, which is much lighter than the rifles of later generations. In addition, the wooden shield made of double-layer wooden boards can also provide a certain amount of buoyancy during armed swimming, making it very easy for special forces to swim armed. 2 days before the attack, these 300 special forces, under the leadership of Cage, practiced hard the fighting skills of using sabers and shields. Speaking of which, these special forces have been trained in the use of sabers. However, it is the first time to use them with shields. Fortunately, these special forces were originally selected from the entire army. Fighting elites, 2 days are enough for them to adapt to using sabers and holding wooden shields. When Marin's scouts climbed up and used telescopes to observe, they found that it seemed that the hundreds of Danish soldiers defending the city gates were all using spears. The spear is indeed a good cold weapon, but the spear also has its disadvantages, that is, it cannot be used in a small space. The spear is a weapon that opens and closes, and requires space to display. In a narrow city gate, sometimes a short knife has more advantages. Of course, the premise is that you don't get knocked over by the spear. Therefore, Marin, Schwartz and others believed that in the narrow city gate, the special forces only needed to use wooden shields to block the stabbing of the enemy's spears, and then take the opportunity to stick to them and use sabers to slash, which was very advantageous. And those enemy infantrymen who used several meter-long spears, if they were close to them, basically had to wait to be slaughtered. After all, they were facing special forces with high martial arts skills. 2 days later, at midnight, the four-sided enemies choir held a grand Danish folk song performance outside the southwest wall of Copenhagen according to the request. The Danish soldiers on the southwest wall naturally watched the choir's wonderful performance with great interest. The soldiers on the northeastern wall section did not relax their vigilance, fearing that the East Frisian army would take the opportunity to attack at night. However, on the southeast and northwest walls facing the water, the Danish soldiers were much less vigilant. Why? Because the Danes also knew that even if the enemy could climb up a few people from these two walls, they would not be able to support the subsequent troops to successfully climb the city. After all, there is water under these two walls. If you want to attack the city, you have to fill the rivers and lakes first, or build a floating bridge. But these two actions cannot be hidden from the eyes and ears of the Danish army. Therefore, the Danish soldiers are more confident about these two walls, and even a little lax in their defense. When the besieged on all sides choir began to perform outside the southwest wall, even many Danish soldiers on duty in the southeast and northwest sections of the wall ran directly to the southwest section of the wall to watch the performance. In fact, at 12 o'clock in the middle of the night, the Danish defenders were still very vigilant. Even on the southeast and northwest walls facing the water, there were many soldiers on duty. But after 2 o'clock in the morning, the Danish defenders on the southeast and northwest sides, who had been tense, began to slack off. Many of them either fell asleep or went to the southwest section of the city wall to watch the performance. Cage, with 300 of his men, lurked in the grass on the other side of the Copenhagen Bay on the southeast section of Copenhagen's city wall, using binoculars to carefully observe the movements of the Danish defenders on the city wall. It was not until about 3 o'clock in the morning that Cage confirmed that the section of the city wall where they were preparing to launch an attack began to really quiet down, and no patrols passed by from time to time. Before setting off, Cage asked his communicator to notify Schwartz, who was leading his troops to lurk near the city gate outside the northeastern city wall. He began to act. Under the leadership of Cage, the 300 special forces tied tortoise-shell-like wooden shields to their chests to increase buoyancy during armed swimming. After swimming across the river successfully, Cage did not rush to lead people to climb the top of the city wall. He waited for a long time and confirmed that there was no one on the top of the city wall before he and his men began to throw flying claws at the top of the city wall. After throwing the flying claws, Cage did not rush to lead people to climb the city wall. Instead, he waited for a while and found that no enemy noticed this before he led everyone to quietly climb up the city wall. Then, on the other side of the top of the city wall, Cage and others did not go down the normal stairs. Because there must be guards on duty at the stairs. So, they simply used the flying claws at the other end of the city wall to hook the inner edge, and everyone tied down from the rope to avoid being discovered by the enemy guarding the stairs. Of course, before everyone went down, the last person who came down threw down the flying claws of others, leaving only one flying claw stuck on the top of the city wall. After successfully entering the city, Cage said nothing and led his men, wearing mahjong mat, wood armor, holding sabers and wooden shields, quietly avoiding the patrols of the defenders, and walked to the northeast side of the city gate. At this time, European cities were generally not big. It took Cage and others only about 30 minutes to get from the southeast section of the city wall to the inside of the northeast city wall gate. When he came to a small alley inside the northeast city gate, Cage looked at the city gate hole and found that there were indeed many people stationed inside. Although most of the defenders slept on the ground in the city gate hole, there were still many people on duty. Moreover, these soldiers guarding the city gate hole were definitely elite. Because at this time, about 100 people were still awake. And the other about 300 people, although they slept, were ready to fight at any time, without taking off their clothes, and with spears beside them. As long as the enemy attacks from the inside, the night watchman will roar, and these sleeping veterans will quickly get up and pick up their spears to block the enemy's attack. If they encounter ordinary enemies, they really can't do anything to them. Because, according to Marin's previous habit of attacking the city, he usually sends 100 or 200 people to disguise themselves and sneak into the city, and then launch a surprise attack. As for sending more people in, that's impossible. After all, European cities are generally small at this time. If you rush in with hundreds of strong men at once, it will be very conspicuous, and it will be difficult not to arouse suspicion. Therefore, under normal circumstances, Denmark sent hundreds of elite veterans to guard the city gate and occupied a favorable terrain, so it should not be broken. For this reason, the confident Danes did not even block the back of the iron city gate with bricks and wood during the war. The reason why Wolf Esbern suggested that the special forces attack was that he knew that the back of the iron city gate in the city was not blocked. As long as there are hundreds of Danish elites in the hundreds of city gates, the city gate can be opened to let the main force in. However, things are not that simple. After all, there are more than 400 elite Danish veterans hiding in the city gate. In addition, there is a military camp not far from the city gate. As long as the soldiers in the city gate hold on for a quarter to half an hour, they can wait for reinforcements. Once the reinforcements arrive, the raiders will definitely be finished. But Marin's 300 special forces are not ordinary soldiers. They are a team of fierce men who can fight several people at once. In addition, they have wooden shields, so they can attack the formation of those spearmen at will. So, everything is different. When most of the soldiers in the city gate were sleeping soundly, Cage suddenly led 300 of his men, without saying a word, and without shouting slogans like, "Kill," he rushed up silently. "Quick! Get up quickly, Luca, Anthony, the enemy is attacking the northeast gate from the city, everyone get up and resist." With a shout, more than 400 veterans in the city gate stood up, holding spears, and began to wait for battle. Unfortunately, the 300 East Frisian special forces who rushed in each held a wooden shield. With wooden shields, they smashed the stabbing of the Danish spearmen and successfully broke into the Danish veterans. Holding sabers, they began to slash and kill at will. Because it was difficult to use spears to turn in the narrow city gate, these elite spearmen became a tragedy when the East Frisian special forces approached them. In just 15 minutes, 300 special forces relied on extremely skilled fighting techniques to easily eliminate more than 400 Danish elite infantrymen in the city gate who could not use spears. Then, with the joint efforts of Cage and others, the big iron gate of the northeastern city wall was completely opened with a muffled, creaking sound. Seeing this scene, Schwartz, who was ambushing outside the northeastern city wall with his men and horses, immediately commanded the army to rush into Copenhagen again from the city gate in the northeast of Copenhagen like a tide. Chapter 496, Pack and Take Away. The more than 10,000 Danish veterans in Copenhagen were already demoralized by the singing of the "Besieged on all sides" choir. The main reason why they had been trying to protect the city walls was that the walls of Copenhagen were too tall and strong. The tall and strong walls of Copenhagen and the big iron gates gave the demoralized Danish veterans a great sense of security, which prevented them from collapsing. However, when the northeast gate was opened and the city wall was lost, the self-confidence of the Danish defenders collapsed at once. Although some Danish veterans still persisted in resistance and prevented the East Frisian army from advancing towards the royal palace, the 250 Musselmen of the Wolf-Fang Commando, led by Khan, took the lead this time. Under the destruction of 250 muscular men wielding maces, the defense line of the few Danish defenders who persisted in resistance was directly defeated. Arriving in front of the Danish royal palace, Schwartz used the same trick again, asking the demolition team to dig a pit and bury the gunpowder barrels, and blew up the main gate of the palace. The main gate of the Danish King Gong is still an oak door, and there is no iron door. After all, Denmark has been in financial difficulties since it was looted by Marin's army last time. It is already the limit to replace the city gate with an iron door. The Danish court does not have the financial resources to replace the palace gate with an iron door. Besides, if the city gate and the iron gate are broken, the Danish royal palace will definitely not be spared, and it will be meaningless to replace the iron gate. At dawn, Marin, surrounded by a large group of guards, entered the royal palace in Copenhagen again with great pride. Facing the complacent Marin, the unlucky King Hans was too lazy to even say a word. He had already been appointed, and he lay directly on the throne without saying a word, clearly letting Marin deal with him. However, Marin now needs to go south to occupy the electorate of Saxony as soon as possible, and he has no time to talk nonsense with King Hans of Denmark. So, after meeting Hans, Marin waved his hand and said, "There is no time to explain, pack up quickly and go to Schleswig with me." King Hans immediately opened his mouth in surprise. He originally thought that Marin would definitely force him to sign a new territorial cession agreement. Indistinctly, King Hans felt that Norway might not be able to be saved. However, he did not expect that the first sentence Marin said when he saw him would be like this. In fact, in today's Kingdom of Denmark, the garrison has been disarmed and imprisoned. And those Danish nobles have basically been controlled and can't make any waves. If it were normal, Marin would naturally stay in Denmark, play tricks, and use various methods to force King Hans to sign an unequal treaty to cede land and the throne. But now Marin is in a hurry to lead the army south, and has no time to deal with the Danish king and the Danish nobles. If 10,000 troops are left in Copenhagen, there will be no problem. However, Marin now needs to concentrate his superior forces to go south, and leaving 10,000 troops in Copenhagen is obviously a bit extravagant. So, after thinking again and again, Marin decided to take the Danish king's family and the Danish nobles to Schleswig first, and then supervise and imprison them on the spot. The reason why the Danish royal family and the nobles were brought to Schleswig for imprisonment is that it is now Marin's territory, which is mainly German. If they are imprisoned in Copenhagen and Marin takes the main force south, the Danes may take the opportunity to riot, kidnap the king and the nobles, and may also release the imprisoned Danish veterans. At that time, Marin will face the dilemma of fighting on two fronts again. Therefore, Marin decisively chose to bring all the Danish royal family and nobles to the city of Schleswig, where they would be guarded by 2,000 local veterans and thousands of militiamen who were trustworthy. Under Michael's governance, the city of Schleswig has now completed the de-Danishization, and the nobles who supported the Oldenburg family have also moved to the city of Las Vegas. Therefore, it is a good choice to put the Danish royal family and the Danish nobles under house arrest in the royal palace in Schleswig. As for the more than 10,000 captured Danish veterans, Marin was too lazy to divide his troops to guard them. So Marin sent people to contact Lübeck and Hamburg to ask them to settle the more than 10,000 Danish veteran prisoners of war. Then, when Marin came back from the war in the south, he would negotiate and arrange again. In this way, Marin would not need to allocate a large number of troops to guard the prisoners of war like he did with the Swiss mercenaries. Although the army of Lübeck and Hamburg was not strong, each family was good at guarding thousands of unarmed prisoners of war. In this way, Marin could lead a complete army of 40,000 to the south. With so many soldiers and horses, Marin could fully demonstrate to those princes who wanted to attack him, so that they would not dare to act rashly. In this way, the merchants in Copenhagen were surprised to find that after the fall of Copenhagen, the East Frisian army did not allow soldiers to rob like last time, but hurriedly packed up the valuable and easy-to-carry property in the royal palace, the mansions of the great nobles, and the Danish treasury, and loaded them onto carriages, as if they were moving. This was indeed the case. While Marin notified Lübeck and Hamburg to send people to take over more than 10,000 Danish veteran prisoners of war, he arranged for his soldiers to pack in the Danish royal palace and the mansions of the great nobles and take them to Schleswig. In order to let Lübeck and Hamburg take over the more than 10,000 veteran prisoners of war with peace of mind, Marin expressed his willingness to hand over the city of Copenhagen to Lübeck and Hamburg until the end of the war, and the negotiations with the Danes finally came to fruition. For the two Hanseatic commercial cities of Lübeck and Hamburg, the period of time they were responsible for managing Copenhagen was enough for them to complete various arrangements in Denmark. The purpose of their arrangement was naturally to suppress local Danish merchants and support traders close to the Hanseatic League. At that time, even if the Danish monarchs and ministers regained their sovereignty, they would sadly find that their own business had been controlled by the Hanseatic League. Therefore, Marin believed that Lübeck and Hamburg would never refuse his proposal. Marin even promised that he would keep the Danish monarchs and ministers for a while longer so that Lübeck and Hamburg would have enough time to complete their arrangements in Copenhagen. Sure enough, when they learned that there was an opportunity to control a metropolis like Copenhagen, Lübeck and Hamburg immediately showed great interest. Moreover, Marin also hinted that they could take advantage of the opportunity of imprisoning more than 10,000 Danish veterans to try to dig out the veterans and try to win them over to Lübeck and Hamburg. In this way, the strength of Lübeck and Hamburg increased, but Denmark was weakened. Even after regaining sovereignty, they were no longer able to cause trouble. After Lübeck and Hamburg sent a large number of sailors to Copenhagen and took over the prisoners of war, Marin quickly took the army and the valuables in the royal palace and the mansions of the Danish nobles, including the Danish royal family members and the nobles themselves, who were also packed together, boarded the merchant ships of Lübeck and Hamburg directly at the port of Copenhagen, and then sailed to the Schlei Bay near the city of Schleswig, and then directly at the city of Schleswig. They will land near Schleswig and place King Hans, the royal family, and all the members of the Danish nobles under house arrest in the royal palace of Schleswig. After that, they will arrange for 2,000 elite soldiers of the 2nd Legion and thousands of militiamen to guard Schleswig to be responsible for strict supervision. As for Marin and his 40,000 troops, after landing near Schleswig, they will go directly south and attack the electorate of Saxony, vowing to capture Wittenberg and capture all members of the eldest branch of the Wettin family except Frederick III. Chapter 497 Michael's Advice. The mighty fleet, carrying 40,000 troops, a large number of Danish royal family members and nobles, and a large amount of property brought by Copenhagen, anchored in the Schlei Bay east of Schleswig. In order to facilitate the docking of these ships and the unloading of goods and the landing of personnel, Mikkel, the Prime Minister of the Duchy of Schleswig, organized a large number of able-bodied men to build a temporary long bridge pier around Schlei Bay. It took half a month to build the long bridge pier, land personnel and transport materials. Then, according to Marin's request, King Hans of Denmark and many royal family members, as well as the great Danish nobles and their families, were arranged to live in the original royal palace in Schleswig. Then, Mikkel blocked all other doors of the royal palace, leaving only the main gate for entry and exit. At the same time, Mikkel also temporarily moved his office out of the royal palace and changed to work at his own home. The royal palace was garrisoned by 1,000 veterans and 2,000 recruits, both to protect the safety of the Danish royal family and nobles and to prevent them from escaping. After all, these distinguished prisoners of war are important bargaining chips for negotiations after the war. If they run away, it will be difficult to talk. Because all 40,000 troops have to be taken to the south, in order to strengthen the security of Schleswig city, Marin specially left more than 100 excellent instructors to help train thousands of militiamen in Schleswig city. These militiamen were temporarily recruited and have little combat effectiveness. Leaving excellent instructors to train them is to enable them to quickly form combat effectiveness and ensure the safety of Schleswig city. As for other places outside Schleswig city, Marin has no intention of managing it now. Even if there is a problem, he is not afraid. As long as his army can return victorious, whoever makes trouble will be caught and killed directly. And if he has to run away, those places will not be important. If he is forced to run away, Marin plans to ship the Danish royal family members and nobles to Norway for refuge at the Long Bridge docks in Schlei Bay. With these hostages in hand, he will not suffer any loss. Therefore, Marin emphasized that Mikkel should not rush to dismantle these temporary long bridge piers, as they might be useful soon. Mikkel, as a veteran politician who had served as the Prime Minister of Denmark for many years, naturally sensed something. So, when no one was around, Mikkel asked Marin directly what happened. Marin did not hide it from Mikkel, because if something happened, he would still count on Mikkel to arrange the escape with important prisoners. Now, it doesn't hurt to tell him the truth. Anyway, Marin has arranged his trusted officers for the 2,000 veterans in the city. Even the militiamen were controlled by more than 100 excellent instructors specially left by Marin. As long as the military power is firmly grasped, there is no need to worry about Mikkel making any waves. Mikkel was silent for a long time after hearing the secrets that Marin told about what happened in Worms. After a long time, he suddenly raised his head and said to Marin, "Sir, we are not yet at the point of escaping from Germany." "Oh. What do you mean?" Marin immediately became interested. In fact, after working hard in Germany for many years, Marin was reluctant to abandon everything and flee overseas. After all, the Ruhr area was a place that Marin had always been optimistic about. If he lost everything in Germany, Marin would definitely not be happy. Moreover, during the war, Marin's subordinates, such as Schwartz, were all officers, not politicians. Therefore, it was difficult for Marin to find subordinates to discuss political affairs. It happened that Mikkel had been the Prime Minister of Denmark for many years, and also the Prime Minister of the Kalmar Union, and his political level was much higher than that of the Prime Minister of East Frisia, Geoffrey. Therefore, Marin also wanted to know Michael's opinions and suggestions. After thinking for a while, Mikkel organized his words and said, "My lord, according to your intelligence, Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, wanted to instigate all the princes to form an alliance to attack you together, but was vetoed by the religious princes headed by Archbishop Hermann IV of Cologne, right?" "Yes, that's right. However, according to the intelligence from Hermann IV, the religious princes gave up their support for the joint attack on me because of the Pope. However, according to the intelligence, most of the secular princes, except for the Kingdom of Bohemia and the Duchy of Cleves that did not participate, are very supportive of Frederick III. All these princes combined can form an army of more than 100,000 people. Let's not talk about whether I can beat them. Even if I can, I won't be able to survive in the German region in the future, because I will be surrounded by enemies," Marin said worriedly. Mikkel nodded, but he changed the subject and said, "But they haven't decided to really start forming a coalition to attack you, right?" "Yes, because they are not very confident now, and hope to persuade those religious princes to send troops together." Marin's army defeated the 50,000 elite soldiers of the Bassa coalition. Although those secular princes were able to gather a total force of more than 100,000, many of these 100,000 were just a bunch of miscellaneous troops, and they might not be able to beat Marin's 40,000 troops. Therefore, Frederick III and other secular princes hope that the powerful Archbishopric of Mainz, Archbishopric of Cologne and Archbishopric of Trier will also join in. In this way, they can gather more than 100,000 or 200,000 troops to deal with Marin, which is a sure thing. "That's good. I heard that you have a close relationship with the current Pope?" Mikkel asked. "Yes, the Pope will definitely stand on my side," Marin answered confidently. "Very good, sir. The first thing you need to do now is to send someone to Rome as soon as possible and ask the Pope to send a messenger to dissuade those religious princes and let them firmly refuse to join the coalition against you. This is very important. Those religious princes are just hesitating now, worried about the relationship between the Pope and you. So, you need to let them see the Pope's firm support for you. If it's too late, maybe some princes will be persuaded by Frederick III." Marin was shocked and immediately realized the importance of this issue. So he nodded seriously and said, "I will immediately arrange for the messenger to rush to Rome at all costs, Mikkel, thank you for reminding me." Mikkel shook his head and said, "It's nothing, sir, I am now on the same boat with you. I have betrayed Denmark, and if you fail again, I will be finished with you." Marin nodded, but he remembered Michael's contribution in his heart. Anyway, it's inevitable to give Michael's descendants some practical rewards later. Mikkel is old and has become the prime minister, so there is no reward for him. But he has a group of descendants, so he can still reward them. Marin was not stingy with titles, land, and good official positions. "Secondly, my lord, while the coalition over there has not been formed yet, you actually have the opportunity to break them up," Mikkel continued. "Break them up? How to do it?" Marin immediately became interested. Marin would be very happy to see that he didn't have to fight the coalition of princes alone. "My lord, I believe you also know that except for a few who are particularly outstanding, such as you, most of the other secular princes are actually short-sighted and stupid. Moreover, they are also very greedy." Marin's eyes lit up immediately, and he said excitedly, "You mean, bribe them?" "Yes, that's right. You can bribe those princes who are not determined, let them sing the opposite tune in the meeting to discuss the formation of the coalition, and muddy the water. Moreover, you said that the Kingdom of Bohemia has a good relationship with you, you can ask them to help speak." Marin nodded, agreeing very much with what Mikkel said. The relationship between the Kingdom of Bohemia and himself was eased because of Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigismund. However, the other party is not on his side, but will not be hostile to him. Therefore, Marin can completely bribe King Vladislaus II of Bohemia to speak for him at the Worms Conference. In addition, Philip, the Palatine Elector, is 57 years old, 15 years older than Frederick III, and may not obey Frederick III. Only Joachim I, a young man, is Frederick III's little fan, so he listens to Frederick III's instigation. In short, as long as Marin is willing to pay the price and bribe those secular princes who are greedy for money, he still has a chance to disintegrate the anti-Marin alliance that Frederick III is trying to set up. In particular, as long as the religious princes do not participate, the King of Bohemia and the Palatine Elector also withdraw from the alliance, then this alliance will have no appeal. After all, when the Elector Joachim I of Brandenburg had already been imprisoned, only Frederick III came forward. Among the 7 electors, only one person took the lead, and his appeal was obviously insufficient. Of course, Mikkel also warned Marin that he must immediately issue a statement to show that his grievances with Brandenburg and Saxony had nothing to do with Emperor Maximilian I, but were just a struggle for interests between the two sides. Marin hesitated because it was a bit disrespectful to the emperor. If Marin announced this, it would be equivalent to publicly drawing a line with the emperor. But Mikkel said that if he did not do this, Marin would still be a threat in the eyes of most German princes, and there would still be a risk of being beaten up by a group. As for the consequences that might make the emperor dissatisfied, Mikkel said that the survival of East Frisia was more important than that. Moreover, Marin had already detained the Swiss mercenaries and created conditions for the emperor to attack Switzerland, which was very worthy of the emperor. At most, he would send someone to explain to the emperor afterwards. It was a matter of life and death, and I believed the emperor would understand. Even if he didn't understand, it didn't matter. Anyway, Marin had long been unwilling to be a mere lackey of the emperor. Mikkel saw this very clearly. After careful consideration, Marin finally accepted all of Michael's suggestions. He sent a messenger to Rome to ask for help from his father-in-law, the Pope, and wrote to Kohler, who stayed in the country, asking him to bring a large amount of gold and silver to the south to bribe the King of Bohemia, the Palatine Elector and other secular princes who were not Frederick III's die-hard supporters, so that they would withdraw from the anti-Marin alliance and leave Frederick III alone. Finally, Marin planned to publicly announce that this war was just a conflict of interest between his alliance with Lübeck and Hamburg and the Union of Brandenburg, Saxony and Denmark, and had nothing to do with the emperor. At the same time, Marin would also express that he respected the political traditions of the German region. This was almost a hint that he respected the autonomy of the princes. Chapter 498 Allies also have to share. Mikkel is indeed a seasoned politician. After Marin made various arrangements, he added, "Sir, we can't just pay for this ourselves. Our allies Lübeck and Hamburg are also rich." Marin immediately understood. Indeed, Lübeck and Hamburg, as the boss and second in the Hanseatic League, have nothing but money and ships. Although Marin can afford these expenses himself, it would be too stupid to bear them alone. What's more, the two allies are local tyrants. Moreover, if Marin is finished, these two cities will definitely not be able to get a good deal. Because, with Frederick III's temperament, after solving Marin, he will definitely rob Lübeck and Hamburg by the way, so as to compensate for the military expenses of the coalition forces and even make a profit. Therefore, Lübeck and Hamburg must not pay. Besides, Marin doesn't want to expose his strong financial resources. Everyone was a little scared of Marin's military strength. It was revealed that Marin had strong financial resources, and it was difficult for Marin not to be targeted. But if Lübeck and Hamburg paid together, it would make sense. Because these two cities are the two richest cities in Germany. Marin even planned to attribute the reason why he could raise 40,000 troops to the funding from Lübeck and Hamburg. In this way, his economic strength would be even less scary, and he could develop in a low-key manner for a while. And Lübeck and Hamburg would never clarify this rumor. Why? Because this rumor is good for them. This means that as long as you cooperate with Lübeck and Hamburg, there is money to be made. In this way, everyone will not dare to offend Lübeck and Hamburg easily, and may even flatter them. Because they are rich people, they can spend some money to find some thugs and beat you up without negotiation. It is better not to offend if you can avoid it. Therefore, spreading this rumor is very beneficial to both parties. Therefore, Marin immediately wrote to Lübeck Grand Speaker Tagfact and Hamburg Grand Speaker Heisenberg, asking them to help share the cost of bribes. He also said that he was not financially strong enough to form such a large army. At the same time, Marin also reminded the two speakers in the letter that if the anti-Marin alliance was really established, if he did not organize a coalition of hundreds of thousands of troops to attack, if he lost, Lübeck and Hamburg would definitely not be saved. Because the leader of the anti-Marin alliance was Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, who wanted to plunder Lübeck and Hamburg the most. It can even be said that as long as Lübeck and Hamburg were plundered, the coalition's military expenses would be recovered and it would be very profitable. Helping himself was actually saving Lübeck and Hamburg. The reason behind this letter really touched the two speakers, Tagfact and Heisenberg. What are rich people most afraid of? The most feared thing is that the property will be robbed. In order to protect their own property, the two great speakers called the parliamentarians together and held a meeting to discuss the issue of paying money. Although they were very reluctant to pay this money, everyone understood that Marin was right. If Marin lost, Lübeck and Hamburg, as Marin's allies, would definitely not be able to get a good deal. What's more, the leader of the anti-Marin alliance has always wanted to abolish Lübeck and Hamburg so that the Saxon business circle could become Frederick III, the boss of the Hanseatic League. Moreover, everyone also understood that this money would not be paid in vain. Why? Because as long as the anti-Marin coalition is not formed, the electorate of Saxony and the electorate of Brandenburg are defeated countries. What obligations do defeated countries have to fulfill? Pay money. At that time, this money can be recovered from the war reparations. In addition, Marin asked Lübeck and Hamburg to reach out to Copenhagen, which also made the two cities very satisfied. Although it was only occupied for a period of time, Lübeck and Hamburg have already started to clean up those local Danish merchants in Copenhagen. In the future, Copenhagen's business will be controlled by the Hanseatic merchants in Lübeck and Hamburg. What if Denmark is dissatisfied? The fleet will come to surround. In addition, the two countries have already agreed that the Danes will not own their own merchant ships in the future. If you want to engage in maritime trade, you must entrust the merchants of Lübeck and Hamburg to use the merchant ships of the two cities for transportation. In this way, Denmark can be prevented from taking the opportunity to develop its navy to the greatest extent, and thus always be under the shadow of Lübeck and Hamburg. In the end, the parliaments of Lübeck and Hamburg approved an amount of 200,000 gold coins respectively, and collected 400,000 gold coins to send to Marin, so as to facilitate the bribery of those secular princes. At the same time, Lübeck and Hamburg also began to exert their political influence to influence other Hanseatic cities except the Hanseatic cities in the Saxony business circle, so that they could help hinder the establishment of the anti-Marin alliance. As for how to influence, many secular princes owe money to the Hanseatic League. Want to raise an army to fight? Sure, pay the money first. If you are willing to withdraw from the alliance, Lübeck and Hamburg can make appropriate compensation, such as cancelling part of the interest. Those who contribute a lot can even cancel some of the principal. Anyway, use economic means to force some poor princes to withdraw from the alliance. After learning about the powerful performance of the two allies, Marin also smiled. Sure enough, people with allies are not alone. If you let yourself carry it alone, it is really hard. And if you have allies, things will go a lot more smoothly. No wonder the princes of Germany like to form alliances and fight in groups. Because it is really cool. There are 200 or 300 princes in the German region, and there are dozens of relatively powerful ones. As long as you win over a group of princes to form an alliance, you will have helpers in the future. Before, Marin was labeled as an emperor, so it was difficult to attract allies. However, this time, Marin issued a statement that he respected the political tradition of Germany, that is, respecting the autonomy of the princes, and he would definitely win the favor of many princes. In the future, maybe he can pull a few helpers over. As for Maximilian I being unhappy, there is no way. After all, Marin's top priority now is to avoid being beaten up by all the princes of Germany. Under strong pressure, Marin made this decision, and Maximilian I had to understand it even if he didn't understand it. After all, saving his life is the most important thing. In fact, the anti-Marin alliance is really against Emperor Maximilian I, who told him to publicly praise the centralization of France when he was young. If they were subordinates and couldn't just form a group to beat up the nominal emperor, these princes might have formed a group to beat up Maximilian I himself. Speaking of which, Marin is also taking the blame for him. At the critical moment, in order to protect himself, it is also a last resort to declare a clear line. Besides, Marin has detained those Swiss mercenaries and created an opportunity for the Habsburg family to take back their ancestral land, the Eagle Castle in Aargau, which is worthy of the Habsburg family. After all, taking back the ancestral land is absolutely of great significance to the Habsburg family. It's like Europeans have always been eager to take back the Christian holy city of Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem is of great significance to Christianity, and the Palestinian region is also the birthplace of Christianity and the birthplace of Jesus. Similarly, as the birthplace of the Habsburg family and the origin of the surname, the Eagle Castle, Habsburg, in Aargau is definitely a holy place in the minds of members of the Habsburg family. However, over the years, the Swiss mercenaries have been too fierce. In addition, the Aargau canton is mostly mountainous, and the Austrian cavalry cannot display their talents and cannot beat those fierce Swiss infantry. Therefore, the plan to recover the ancestral land has never been realized. Originally in history, Maximilian I went into battle barehanded and mobilized the Austrian army to participate in the Swabian War. In fact, he wanted to unite the army of the Swabian League, take the opportunity to defeat Switzerland, and recover the ancestral land. Unfortunately, the teammates are pigs, the enemies are tigers, and the combat effectiveness of the Austrian army is indeed not as good as the Swiss mercenaries. Therefore, Maximilian I failed in the Swabian War, in history, and was almost abolished by the imperial parliament. However, due to the intrusion of the time traveler Marin, Maximilian I did not rush into the pit, nor did he lose the war. Therefore, Maximilian I is in a good situation now. After Marin detained the main force of Swiss mercenaries, Switzerland is now extremely short of troops. With more than 10,000 people from France and the Duchy of Guedes not returning, there are only 3,000 or 4,000 old, weak and sick people in Switzerland, and their combat effectiveness is definitely not stronger than that of the Austrian army. As long as the emperor seizes the opportunity, he will definitely be able to take back the canton of Aargau, and even get involved in other states. The Habsburg family must be grateful for this favor. Such a big favor is enough to offset Marin's mistake of publicly declaring a clear line. Besides, Marin was forced. If he didn't draw a clear line publicly, he might be beaten up. At such a critical moment, the Habsburg family was unwilling to send troops to help Marin fight. After all, they are still busy sending troops to recover the canton of Aargau, the ancestral home of the Habsburg family. Chapter 499, Secret Activities. It has to be said that drawing a line with the emperor on the surface is indeed a good way to solve the current dilemma. After Marin issued a declaration of respecting the German political tradition, according to Michael's advice, public opinion changed quickly. In the declaration, Marin repeatedly emphasized that he was also a member of the princes and would not make things difficult for himself. This statement is clearly a surrender to the princes group. At the same time, it is also a reminder to the German princes that now I am also a powerful prince, and I will definitely care about my own interests. In order to spread the news quickly, Marin scattered a large number of people and horses, and in just a few days, after hundreds of horses died, the news quickly spread to major German regions, especially Worms. This declaration really worked well, although it caused dissatisfaction among many members of the Habsburg family. However, Marin had already secretly sent someone to send a letter to Emperor Maximilian I, indicating that it was a helpless move to avoid being beaten up. Therefore, except for those who were unaware of the emperor's faction, the emperor and other bigwigs who were aware of it did not care much. After all, the merits that Marin created for the Habsburg family in recovering the Swiss Aargau alone were enough to offset Marin's disrespect to the emperor this time. As for those princes, especially those secular princes, some centrists, they had no grudges against Marin. They were just bewitched by Frederick III and thought that Marin was going to help Maximilian I unify Germany, so they were fooled on board. Now, Marin claims to respect tradition and reminds everyone that he is also a great prince. Obviously, he wants to draw a line with Emperor Maximilian I, so why should he fight him? There is a lot of military expenditure. Therefore, the formation of the anti-Marin alliance, which was originally inclined to be completed, was suspended at the last minute. Some princes said that they needed to wait and see for a while. Anyway, Marin's fiefdom is there and will not fly away. If Marin really shows signs of joining forces with the emperor to unify Germany, it will not be too late to send troops to attack together. But Frederick III was very anxious, because if he dragged on, when Marin had finished cleaning up Denmark, he would definitely march into the electorate of Saxony. If the electorate of Saxony was ravaged by Marin's tens of thousands of troops, the economy of the electorate of Saxony would definitely regress. Moreover, if a coalition was formed early, even if Marin's army could not be defeated, the other party could be forced to take back 15,000 Saxon prisoners of war without spending any money. Therefore, Frederick III personally went out to visit the princes who were affected by Marin's declaration, and encouraged them to send troops quickly and follow him to fight Marin. Unfortunately, these secular nobles, although a little stupid, were not hopelessly stupid because of their high level of education. Therefore, most of them chose to wait and see. Of course, there were also a small number of weak-willed princes who began to be persuaded by Frederick III and changed their positions again. But at this time, Kohler personally brought more than 100,000 or 200,000 gold coins, and arrived at Worms quietly under the escort of hundreds of guards, and began to contact and bribe those important secular nobles in private. In addition, 200,000 gold coins each from Lübeck and Hamburg were also on the way to Worms. As long as there is enough money, I don't believe that this anti-Marin alliance cannot be smashed. With a large amount of money invested, the positions of many nobles changed quickly. After spending almost 20,000 gold coins, the Kingdom of Bohemia was conquered first. Originally, because of the relationship with Grand Duke Alexander, King Vladislaus II of Bohemia was not so averse to Marin. Although Vladislaus II did not take the initiative to speak for Marin, he did not add insult to injury. For example, when Frederick III encouraged the secular princes to join forces to send troops, Vladislaus II chose to oppose it. Of course, the Kingdom of Bohemia only opposed sending troops, and did not affect the intention of other princes to send troops. But after Koller spent more than 20,000 gold coins, Vladislaus II's attitude changed drastically. Originally, he just didn't want to send troops to participate in the siege of Marin. But after Koller's activities, Vladislaus II's attitude towards the formation of an anti-Marin coalition army was no longer negative, but turned to opposition. Not only did he oppose it himself, he even persuaded other princes not to participate. In any case, the King of Bohemia is the head of the 4 secular electors. Now, the King of Bohemia has made such a statement, which is definitely a heavy blow to Frederick III's deception plan. After dealing with the King of Bohemia, Koller continued to work hard and went to the Palatine Elector Philip, spending a lot of money, hoping that the Palatine Elector Philip would publicly oppose the formation of an anti-Marin coalition. The Palatine Elector was originally a little jealous of Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, who was 15 years younger than him but had a much higher prestige than him. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with him, and he was going to play soy sauce. However, after Marin issued a declaration to draw a clear line with the emperor and declared that he was also a prince, Elector Philip felt that it was really unnecessary to form a group to attack Marin. Moreover, in any case, Elector Philip felt that Frederick III was using everyone to help Saxony fight. It's just that Philip was too lazy to care about those things before. After all, Elector Philip and Marin were not familiar with each other, so there was no need to offend Saxony for Marin, who was not familiar with him. But now it's different. After Koller threw out 25,000 gold coins, Philip, who received enough benefits, decided to say a few words for Marin. After all, after Marin issued the declaration, some of Frederick III's statements were somewhat untenable. In addition to receiving Marin's benefits, Elector Philip also planned to say a few words to oppose Frederick III's views. In this way, the prestige of Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, who was more famous than himself, could also be hit. You know, the Elector is not a monolithic entity. Apart from the 3 religious electors, there are also open and covert struggles among the 4 secular electors. King Vladislaus II of Bohemia, who comes from Poland and Lithuania, is currently obsessed with having children and giving birth to male heirs. At present, Vladislaus II has changed 2 queens, but Lehos II, who died in battle, was not born until August 1506. In other words, Vladislaus II is now at a critical moment of making a baby. As the number 1 secular elector of Germany, Vladislaus II actually has no interest in intervening in German affairs. Otherwise, as the number 1 secular elector of the Holy Roman Empire, he would not let Frederick III, the secular elector ranked behind him, become the leader among the German princes. As for Philip, the Palatine elector, although he usually supports Frederick III, he is still a little jealous of Frederick III's great reputation. After all, Elector Philip was 15 years older than Frederick III, but his reputation was not as good as his, so he inevitably felt a little uncomfortable. It just so happened that Koller gave him money, and Marin issued a declaration that was equivalent to drawing a clear line with the emperor, which also gave Elector Philip an excuse to oppose the formation of a coalition. If Marin had not issued this declaration, he might not have an excuse to oppose Frederick III's proposal. As for the other elector, Elector Joachim I of Brandenburg, although he was a fan of Frederick III, he was already a prisoner of Marin and could not give Frederick III any support at all. Therefore, Koller's bribery was very successful, making the King of Bohemia and the Elector of Palatine, among the 4 secular electors, opponents of forming an anti-Marin coalition. Frederick III didn't even know that the coalition had not yet been successfully formed, and the 2 big guys among the princes were ready to pull his legs. Chapter 500, Opportunity to be Independent. In the Duchy of Schleswig, Marin suspended his plan to march because of political means. Otherwise, if he rashly marched into the electorate of Saxony before the political means were effective, it would be easy for Frederick III to take advantage of him. For example, the secular princes were still hesitating whether to form a coalition to fight Marin. If Marin led his troops south in a hurry, Frederick III might take advantage of this crisis and say to the princes, "There is no time to explain, get on the car. No, send troops quickly." Those princes who had not made up their minds might be pulled into Frederick III's chariot in a hurry and join the war with Marin. In fact, Marin may not be afraid of the coalition formed by the secular princes. As long as the religious princes do not participate in the war, Marin has a chance to win. However, even if he can win, Marin will not choose to go to war with most of the secular princes. Because as long as blood is shed, it will be difficult to reconcile in the future. Just like the later Chinese, it is difficult to forgive the Japanese devils. Marin is a man who wants to be a hegemon, but what are the prerequisites for being a hegemon? It is a huge prestige, and he can do 100 responses. But if he fights with most of the secular princes this time, it will be over. If he loses, Marin will have to flee overseas with his family. This situation is naturally not what Marin wants to see. Even if he wins, Marin will not be good, and the hatred with those secular princes is established. In the future, what Marin wants to do, let alone 100 responses, it will be good if he is not unanimously opposed. Therefore, what Marin really fears is not the combat effectiveness of the princes' coalition, but the collective hatred of the princes. Therefore, after listening to Michael's advice, Marin did not immediately march south, but was busy bribing those princes to break up the anti-Marin alliance. At the same time, Marin risked offending the Habsburg family and publicly supported the autonomous tradition of the princes, which was also one of the important means to break the deadlock. Although, after doing so, both sides may not be human. However, at least, Marin will no longer be regarded as the emperor's running dog by the princes, and the risk of being beaten up by a group is also reduced. At most, Marin will form his own system in the future and become a third-party force outside the emperor and the princes. Moreover, Marin has an army of 40,000 and is fully capable of becoming a third-party force alone. Moreover, Marin's diplomacy cannot be considered a failure. At least, those religious princes will give him some face when his father-in-law is the pope. Although he will not form an alliance with himself, after all, it is not easy for Marin to publicize that the pope is his father-in-law, which cannot be made public. It is still possible for those religious princes to maintain a friendly and non-aggression relationship with himself. As for Maximilian I, although Marin made amends afterwards and sold Switzerland to the emperor. However, Marin's behavior of openly singing against the emperor still left a rift between the two sides. Even if Marin made such a move out of necessity, the Habsburg family must be very unhappy. In the future, it will be difficult for Marin to be regarded as a complete member of Austria. Although the two sides did not turn against each other because of the sale of Switzerland to the Habsburg family, from then on, the relationship between the two sides will be downgraded from ironclad allies to ordinary interest allies. However, this is also an opportunity for Marin, an opportunity to be independent. As a time traveler, he should naturally be the protagonist. Why would Marin be willing to be a lackey for Emperor Maximilian I? However, as a nobleman, honor and reputation are very important. Marin's own fortune began with being a lackey of Emperor Maximilian I. It is inevitable that he will be labeled as the emperor's lackey and cannot be washed away. If he takes the initiative to leave the emperor's command, although there are enough benefits, he will definitely have a bad reputation. The notoriety of a traitor and a traitor cannot be escaped. In the future, if Marin wants to do something or associate with someone, he might be ridiculed by someone, humph, traitor. If he were put in ancient China, he might be labeled a big hat such as, 3 surnamed slave, like Lu Fengxian. In fact, Lu Bu just chose the most favorable option for himself, but in ancient times, this was a manifestation of disloyalty. So, Lu Bu's reputation is bad. Marin had always followed the footsteps of Maximilian I, and the most important thing was that he was afraid of getting a bad reputation like Lu Bu. But now, this time Frederick III wants to incite all the German princes to unite and attack him, although it brings great crisis to Marin. However, this is not an opportunity. What opportunity? It is to give Marin an opportunity to openly break away from the emperor without carrying too bad a reputation. People always seek benefits and avoid harm. Under the huge risk of being attacked by all the German princes, Marin decisively admitted his weakness and drew a clear line with the emperor. This is not a shameful thing. At least, in ancient Europe, it is not shameful. Ancient Europe is not the same as ancient China. In ancient China, people praised the kind of heroes who would rather die than surrender, and despised those who surrendered. But in ancient Europe, although those loyal ministers were also praised, they did not despise the act of surrendering and being soft. Therefore, in ancient Europe, it was normal for nobles to surrender and pay ransom after being captured, and they would not be despised. Just like Marin now, there is a risk of being beaten up by all the German princes. It is not an unforgivable betrayal in the eyes of Europeans of this era to admit that he is a coward and draw a clear line with the emperor. After all, being good at self-protection is a tradition of Europeans from ancient times to the present. In this way, Marin's departure from the emperor's camp was not an active departure, but a helpless departure when his life's safety was threatened. This kind of behavior would be despised in ancient China, but it would be forgiven in ancient Europe. In this way, Marin not only achieved the goal of independence from the emperor, but also did not bear the notoriety of a traitor. It was really the best of both worlds. So, after the initial anger, Marin was actually secretly delighted. However, the price is a bit high. Because, if you want to disintegrate the anti-Marin alliance formed by the princes through bribery, it is estimated to cost hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Fortunately, this expenditure is shared by allies. Otherwise, Marin will bleed a lot. Fortunately, after this bleeding, Marin's status will change, from the emperor's lackey, to a powerful prince in his own right. Moreover, because of his strong military strength, as long as he survives this transition period, from then on, Marin will become an important third-party force that the emperor and the princes will compete to win over. After all, Marin, who has a strong military strength, will see his strength surge no matter which side he leans towards. After that, the diplomatic dilemma will be away from Marin.